Hello, so welcome to Mental Health and Business. Today I have the honor of talking to Alex Morin, who's a very interesting business person, human person. He's co-founder of Working Writers Co., and he's here to tell us about his journey, about where he was and where he is. And I think you're in for a treat. So, Alex, welcome again.
Hey, thanks, Nicholas, for having me. It's an honor to speak with you.
Yeah.
This is our second conversation now. We had a brief one, and I really like your energy. I really like your line of questioning, the things that interest you, and I think we have a synergy here. So I'm excited to see what kind of magic we create as we just talk randomly today and have
Yeah.
a good conversation about mental health and mental well-being in business.
Yeah. Me too. Me too. Totally cool. So, why don't you start? When I start asking you some questions I've already asked you, but our listeners don't know the answers yet. Um, Tell us a bit about where you come from and how you landed in this interesting position that you're currently in.
Sure. Like so many people in the Western world, I was born to a very normal family. I had a brother and a sister growing up on the west coast of Canada, and I had what I would call an idyllic childhood, meaning that I was exposed to all kinds of interesting things, education wise, arts wise, and was given a lot of freedom by my parents as well. Freedom to explore nature and go skiing up in Whistler and just be in nature and become one with it. So I just think back so fondly to my time growing up. One of my momentous occasions was losing my dad at his age. He was 49, and I would have been about 19 or 20 at the time, and
Sorry.
that was formative for me. My first encounter with a family member who had passed away, but because of the love we shared in the family, and I felt loved even after he had left. I think I was able to process that fairly well and move through life, still having that as part of me, and feeling that loss, but always feeling loved.
Mm.
So my journey goes through university, where I fell in love with a woman there who later became my wife. And she was an Ontarian living in British Columbia who wanted to move back east. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, Nicholas. I had done an English literature degree. And I suppose with an English literature degree, you can do a few things, right? And I chose music. I had always been interested in music, having been exposed to it at a young age. And so I played instruments, I sang opera, and then I got into rock and roll after I took a gap year and went to Australia and started playing guitar.
Mm.
And when my girlfriend at the time said, I want to move back to Toronto, I thought, well, I'll go with you. Toronto's a great place to make it if I'm going to do music.
Mm.
And that really formulated the second part of my life. And in order to sustain oneself in a big city like Toronto, you kind of have to have a job also. And yes, I was working as a waiter, like so many musicians and actors do. But I needed to make a bit more money. We were getting a bit more serious. I had proposed at the time. We were having our first child, and I went to a headhunter and said, I have an English lit degree, and I made up a couple of things on my resume based on ways I had helped my in-laws with some communications they had done. And lo and behold, I get a job in we'll call it corporate America, even though I live in Canada, working at a somewhat of a hybrid advertising firm. In fact, we were a promotional product supplier. And this is really formative for me because my ex-wife, my first wife, who I just mentioned, will tell you that this changed me. Alex, you changed at that moment. And of course, my life unfolds. I spend over 20 years in that industry. And along the way, another formative event for me is that my oldest son gets stabbed at the age of 16 years old. And this changes everything in my life and ushers in the third act of my life that I'm in right now.
Mm.
And the third act has me quitting my job immediately, knowing that I'm not going to work in the corporate world as I am, spending all this time on the road, being away from my family, getting up to all sorts of negative things. And we can talk about that in a few minutes if you like. I just knew I needed a massive change. And my son's stabbing, and incidentally, he lives. So for anyone listening, he lives, but it's the jolt that I need in my life to realize what's important to me. And I decide to leave this corporation and start heart-based businesses. And this is where I'm at today, Nicholas.
Mhm.
4 years after that incident, it happened in 2020. We're in 2024 right now, and I have found purpose in life. I am a happy guy. I always was a happy guy, but I had I guess things I was working through, and I'm on a journey. We're all on a journey. It never ends until the day that we pass away.
Mhm.
And this third act is fascinating to me, and a source of tremendous fulfillment and learning. So that gives you a little snapshot of my life in three parts.
Well, I so appreciate your transparency and the comfort that you have in telling your story. That's not the usual response. Tell me how you got into the publishing world, and what is Working Writers Co. about?
So what's interesting is I should have known in 2001 when I started my corporate career that I was more geared towards publishing and writing. And I'll tell you why, Nicholas. Because the very first assignment I had, and I was hired as an account manager to service the territory of Quebec. My dad was
Mm.
French. They sent us to French immersion school, so all the kids spoke French in my house. And I took on a job as an account manager for Quebec. And the first assignment on my very first day was, Alex, can you write a bio of yourself? Take all the time you need. And I sat down at my computer and I banged one out in about a half an hour, and I presented it to my boss, and my boss just laughed at me. You're like, seriously, it took you half an hour to go home and take a week on this. It takes people a week to do it. And then I
Mm.
said, why don't you read it first? And she read through it and said, this is phenomenal. Like,
Mm.
wow, like you're a writer? And I said, I don't know if I'm a writer. I have an English lit degree. I certainly appreciate literature. And so as far back as that time, I was moving in the wrong direction. And I can't really say wrong because everything happens in life for a reason, but I was meant to be in publishing. I was meant to be a writer. I was meant to express myself that way. I discovered 24 years later. Nevertheless, the realization for me, Nicholas, came after that moment where my son was stabbed. I'm now in Act 3, and I say I want to start heart-based businesses. So I get the idea to start a podcast. I do that for a little while. It's difficult to monetize. I quit my corporate job, so I'm not making a paycheck anymore. I got to bring in some money if I'm going to pay the mortgage. And in a business course that I had signed up for prior to my son being stabbed, that I put on hold when he was stabbed, I meet somebody in a group. And this woman, Marcy Barbaro, happens to be an author. And she says, I'm writing a book. Oh, fabulous. That's cool, Marcy, I say in this business group. And she says, well, I've been writing it for 2 years and it's not published yet. And I said to her, well, why isn't it published yet? And she said, well, I just can't finish the thing.
Mm.
And I said, look, I'm not a professional editor by any stretch of the imagination, but why don't you send me your manuscript and I'll have a look at it. And she sent it to me. I had a look at it, and I thought it was marvelous. I thought it was really, really good. And I said, Mars, this thing's amazing. You got to publish this. Now, here's a couple of things I might do, and I would encourage you to finish this part off, and let's get
Mm.
that done, and let's get this thing out in the world. And that was the encouragement it took for her to get this book published. After 2 years, it was like, okay, I'm getting it done. So
Mm.
shortly thereafter, she says to me, Alex, would you be interested in starting a book writing company with me? I'll bet there are tons of people out there in the world who have a story and they just don't know how to write a book or how to get it out there, or they don't think they're good enough. There's probably a million reasons why people need our service. And I really didn't think about it for a long time, Nicholas. And I said, Marcy, let's do it. Let's give it a try. And I
Mhm.
wasn't averse at the time to starting 10 businesses, 20 businesses. It didn't matter to me. I was
Mhm.
set on exploring what was out there as long as it was heart based. And to me, the notion and the idea of exercising one's creativity really rang a bell. And hey, I have a lit degree. I love writing. I love reading. So everything kind of matched up, and I said, let's do this. And I had second thoughts, over those first few months and into the first year, not making a ton of money, but I stuck with it. And today I've dropped some of the other businesses that I started, and I'm almost exclusively focused on this business in terms of bringing in revenue. But more importantly, Nicholas, it resonates for me. I love editing now. I love
Mm,
teaching people how to write. I love seeing the transformative process of someone who's got something to say and then expresses it and analyzes that material from a variety of perspectives
mm.
in a way that enriches their lives. So I have found what I love doing in this weird roundabout way. And that's why I co-founded and started Working Writers Co. with my partner, Marcy
Well,
Barbaro.
that's such a wonderful story, and I have to say, as a as a psychologist of many years, um, I won't say that I won't say that the circuitous route is better, because that would be a silly thing to say, but I will say that the circuitous routes typically last longer. Like mine for example, I started off thinking that I wanted to be an actor, and then I got a degree in English, and then classics, and then I did publishing, and I did this thing and that thing, and then finally I think if I ever grow up, I too want to be a writer, and I
Right
do
on.
write, and I do write, but it's that kind of like, oh, I mean, to say it's a calling, I think is schmaltzy, but I think we fall into these things in ways that somehow seem more profound than the kid at 17 who wants to be a physician. I mean, not that that doesn't work also, but there's something I think a little suspect about that. So I'm always pleased to hear stories like this. What is there a kind of book that you guys are most interested in helping people write? Is it fiction? Is it memoir? Is it what is it?
So we hadn't pigeonholed ourselves when we started the company. We were open to any kind of book, whatever you want to write, we could tackle it. There's the craft of writing, and there is the mindset of writing, and these two things have to come together. And we felt that we had both of those elements covered in a way that could support a fiction writer, a memoir writer, a thought leadership writer, all these different varieties and genres of writing. But as it happened, our first five writers, right out of the gate, were all writing memoirs or some sort of biography or thought leadership book that was reflective of their own experience. And so we figured for quite a while that, okay, let's call that our niche. Let's call that
Hmm.
our area of specialty, because we're learning, and we're learning with these authors. But as we expanded and we got referrals and people came to us and we prospected, we gained other types of writers, children's book writers, writers writing fiction, straight fiction, and so to answer your question, today I would say the majority of our writers are writing memoirs or thought leadership books. But we do it all. We do fiction writing as well. And I find that really refreshing. I find that really cool to
Yeah.
step out of autobiography and then move into a different type of creative space. So as in my role, I find that quite beautiful. So to answer your question succinctly now, we do all genres.
All genres. And so you're people should come to, writers should come to you if they want intelligent and thoughtful help in their writer's block. Is that right?
Yeah, that might be one of the reasons to come to us and speak with us is, hey, I'm blocked. And it might not even be blocked in the writing sense. I've written a chapter and I can't go any further. It might be that I know I have something to say and I haven't had the courage to be able to do that, or I don't think I have the skill to be able to express it. And that's
Mm,
where I'm blocked. And so, writers come to us at different stages. We have writers who have written half a book already, and they're like, I need your services. I'm never going to publish this thing if I don't have a professional book coach working with me. And we have other people who say, I have an idea. And that's as far as it's ever gotten. And I've been sitting
mm,
on this idea for 10 years and I'm dying to get it out. And I know I have to do it. So, yes, it does revolve around some kind of a block. And other times you just meet the right person at the right time. For instance, we're working with a writer right now. She's Brazilian and is now American, but born in Brazil, speaks Portuguese, has written two books in the Portuguese language in law. So she studied law
mm.
and has written two books in that language around family law. And she doesn't have a block per se. We just happen to meet her at the right time in life where she's like, I want to get a book out in the English language. I have something to say. And her business is transitioning. And so we meet people, it tends to work out this way, that we meet people who are in transition.
Hmm.
And the world has a funny way of just working out, of introducing you to these people at the right time, in the right place. And so I guess, we'll work with anyone who has a burning desire to express themselves, I guess.
And um, what does this look like operationally? Like, do the two of you meet with them together? Do you trade off? Are there
Yeah.
classes?
So good question. Operationally, there are, when you own a business, you have to think, how am I going to service my customers, and who are my customers? And we've established that our customers are generally people in a transformative time in their lives who want to express themselves. And then the how is, well, how are we going to meet what they need in terms of an ability to be able to write the book? And so we went to market with an all-inclusive deal. Hey, you want to write a book? We can get it done in 6 months. That is to say, we'll get a manuscript done. It'll have the whole story arc. It'll go from beginning to end, and you'll be able to take that to a publisher and do a final edit on it. But we allow you to get that story out. So that was what we went to market with. And we quickly discovered that a lot of people, when we were prospecting, were saying, no, I don't have the kind of time to write a book. That doesn't work for me. And part of the all meal deal was we meet on Tuesday evenings and Thursday afternoons. Tuesday evenings is the craft of writing. Sometimes we have mindset lessons. Sometimes we have professional guest speakers come on that have something to do with the writing industry. And Thursdays are always reading days, where our writers read their material and get peer feedback and professional feedback from us. All the while, we developmentally edit the work, meaning that we're in the manuscript in real time operationally. And if you were writing, Nicholas, I'd be away on my computer every morning and going, okay, Nicholas, this part in chapter 2 is amazing. I like how you're following the theme from chapter 1. Tell me, are you going to follow this throughout the book? And is this going to be part of the climax? So,
Mm.
we'll talk those things through. I also do proofreading at the same time, though we are very cognizant and very aware. We want to tell our readers or our writers, that's not our specialty. The publishing phase will get that done. They'll do the proofreading and the copy and the line editing. We
Mhm.
help you with the story. That's our area of expertise. So operationally, that's the way it works. But we realized that people need different ways to work. And so we came up with a chapter by chapter approach. If you don't have time for Tuesday evenings, Thursday afternoons, write a chapter, submit it to us, give us 48 hours. We'll go through it. Two professional writers and editors, me and my partner, Marcy. And then in 48 hours, you're now free to book a meeting with us. We'll give you an hour of our time to go through those edits, talk them through. Hey, this was wild. This could be developed. This
Mm.
had no continuity. What are you thinking here? Like, do you think you're gonna want to go there in the future? And so after that hour is done, they walk away with an edited piece that has notes in it and directions they can go. And we typically spend the last few minutes of that chapter by chapter approach talking about what you're going to do for the next chapter. You go away, you write it on your own time, and that could be next week, that could be next month, that could be next year.
Mm.
Your timeline, your choice. And we needed to have an option that met the needs of people who were busy. That was option number 2. And then, of course, option number 3 is for people who just want to dip their feet. Or it's like, look, I can't afford to spend money to be with you for 6 months, and I can't afford like at the chapter by chapter, but I have a feeling you guys are the real deal. Can I
Mm.
wet my feet? And we thought, okay, well, join us on the Tuesday calls and the Thursday calls, and we'll call this Creating Community. And you can join in and you can be part of it. We won't edit your work, we won't read your work, but you can become part of our reading rotation on Thursdays, and you can sample some of your stuff and get feedback on it. And so
Mm.
this is an inexpensive way to join the community. And those who join that Creating Community typically end up spending a few weeks with us and say, oh my gosh, this is incredible. I'm upgrading. I need to
Mm.
be part of this community.
Uh,
So I hope that answers your question in terms of how it works operationally. This company is only 3 years old. We're still evolving. We're still growing. There's lots of places we envision going. But this is where we're at today, and it's going well. It's expanding on a day-to-day basis.
It sounds amazing. It sounds like such a thoughtful, interesting way of working. Forgive my ignorance. Is heart-based business a thing? I never heard of that other than you. Did you
Well,
invent that?
I love the question because I'm writing a book right now with my business partner, Marcy Barbaro. And we've settled on writing a book about a heart-based business. Um, why are we going to do that? Oh, for a variety of reasons. But let me answer that question. Is heart-based business something? You haven't heard of it. We in preparation for writing the book, of course, we Googled heart-based business. Like, does this exist? Has someone already written this book? And there are books about heart-based businesses. And I haven't read those books yet. I will probably pick up a couple to understand the direction people are going. But to me and to my partner, heart-based business means that it aligns with what you want to do. It aligns with your purpose and your values, this business. And so do your customers. So it aligns with where they're at this particular moment. And when those two forces meet, it eliminates, in my mind, this idea of a capitalistic business that's built on revenue and currency, monetary currency. Not that we forsake that. We can't get around that at the moment, though. This book is going to be a challenging book to write, and I can't wait for the challenge. I'm in the opening stages right now, but I want to challenge the whole idea of capitalism, and I want to challenge that idea of exchange of money, and I'd like that to be a part of this book that's about the heart-based business. And because that has already been done and written, like the book Heart-Based Business, we're going to change the title of it. And for fear of someone else grabbing that new title, I won't mention it right now. But I've got a new working title. Marcy and I have figured that out. And I think it speaks more directly to where we want to go and what we want to talk about. And our goal, Nicholas, is to chronicle the building of our business and to share and really open the doors to what we're doing, why we're doing it, why it's working, and how you too, dear reader, can enjoy life in a heart-based business. And I mean that from a variety of perspectives. As an entrepreneur, you can create a heart-based business that is just so aligned that it doesn't feel like work. You're dying to get down to your computer and work. And then if you're a corporation and you've got shareholders and it's all about the money and it's all about the revenue and it's all about the profits, I want to be able to crack your heart open a little bit. And I want you to be able to read this and say, I could go in this direction step by step. And I'm not going to forsake my shareholders and I'm not going to blow the whole thing up. But I think there's a different way to go about it. And I've learned that if you take things step by step, you can get to where you want to get. And if you want to just dive in, you can also break something right open. And I'm hoping to speak to people on both of those levels at the same time in this book. So that to me is what a heart-based business is about, Nicholas.
Okay, so it's so interesting. So heart-based business is hard to say. Heart-based business is one. Is it safe to say then that the ethos is not so much transactional as complementary?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I love the idea of collaboration, right? I love that word, collaboration. And I feel like business is a home for collaboration. I feel like business should be collaborative in every sense of the word. And I mean that with your partner, if you've got partners in your business. I mean that with your customers. Your customers should collaborate and feel like they're part of your business. We launched a new website last week. And on last night's call, it was Tuesday evening. I don't know what day you're going to send this out, but now your audience knows we're recording on a Wednesday. But on Tuesday evening last night, just before we left the call, we asked all of our writers on the call if they wouldn't mind taking a look at our new website and giving us some feedback, the same way that we give them feedback when they're presenting their writing to us. And we'll take it, good, bad, ugly, right? So this is a collaborative approach, and this is when your customers feel like they're part of your business. And we also want to reward our customers when they bring in more customers. And so we've got a beautiful referral program. And we're not the first to invent that. It's been around forever, right? But I want to reward. I want to give back at every opportunity. And so the more I give as an employee in my own company, the more I get back from my customers. And so it's collaborative. And it becomes collaborative in every sense of the word, in every sense of the word, customers, partners, and then employees as well. And, we're at the stage now where we're hiring employees. And we always say to our employees or prospective employees, look, it's our goal to share the wealth. It's our goal to share and for you to grow personally, grow professionally, and grow monetarily. And we just had that conversation with our marketing coordinator. And we have a budget for her at the moment, and it's not a budget that's going to make her rich by any stretch of the imagination. But our intent is to grow that budget exponentially. And as we grow, let's just keep on going, and you'll be fed, and we'll do it together at the same time. So that's the essence of that word, collaboration. And it goes so well with compassion. I don't know, these C words are just kind of hitting me these days, Nicholas. Collaboration, compassion. I love it. Culture, these types of things.
It's so interesting, in my field, years ago, some smart person decided to take a look at relationships, and relationships can be described in many ways, but transactional is a word that I think is very apt, unfortunately, for most relationships. It's transactional. Transactional meaning whether it's sexual or business or theological. People, I will give you this if you give me that. So this is predicated on a trade, and I don't cast aspersions on those types of relationships. Those are preferable, in fact, for many people. It's not collaborative; it's transactional. We're not in this together in the sense that we're focused on the dyad, right? We're in this because we want something, and we're clear on what it was. I'll do this to you; you do this to me, as opposed to collaborative or complementary relationships where you really are in it together and you exist as individuals distinctly, but you're also aware of the us, and you're interested in the us, and you're interested in preserving the us, right? I would say to you, and I've been saying this to a number of business folks, what about thinking about the questions you hire people with? What about rethinking those questions? So instead of asking about background and all that, and not to be because everybody's so offended immediately about everything today, but ask questions like, what are your relationships like? What when you're angry, what do you look like? And are you ever angry? You're never angry. You don't have to be a psychologist, but I think the introduction of those types of questions are important for folks like you, because otherwise you're going to get bitten in the ass, because what you're wanting to do is so lovely and so giving, but the people that you're interviewing are not necessarily as nice or balanced as you are, and you want to know before they come in, before you give them a desk, you want to know, like, have you ever been arrested?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I really appreciate the advice, and I think that intuitively we do that. I think that when we're interviewing a candidate for a new position or a contract position, what's most important is the energy, right? Like that to me is very intuitive. And when I was in the corporate world and responsible for hiring and firing, that is what I would do instinctively. Of course, I would look at the resume if it was a position that required skills and expertise. You'd need to know that those got acquired. But yeah, for me, it's always been about the energy. I used to, you're often asked to write a bio of yourself for various reasons, if you're speaking or if you're doing something or making a presentation somewhere. And I used to begin my bios with Alex is energy. That was just the way that I always did it. And I don't know why I did it. I just felt like it was the most honest thing to say. And I hold that feeling today, that that's really all I am. That's what I am. That's what we all are. And so I've always been attracted to energy, and interested by energy, whether it's similar or dissimilar. I'm interested. I'm curious. I want to work with it. So in the hiring process, yes, I am very much interested in your energy as opposed to what it looks like on your resume. So I appreciate that advice.
Do you ask do you ask questions? How do I say this? Do you ask unpleasant questions? Do you ask questions that are geared in some way to ruffle feathers and see what happens?
I don't know that I have, Nicholas. I might want to start doing that. You know, I might. It would be interesting. Look, I'm on a journey myself. There was a time in my life where I was a pacifier, and and that's what that's what I was most comfortable, that was the scenario I was most comfortable being in. And
Mm-hmm.
so it wouldn't have likely crossed my mind to ask that type of question. Of course, we're all familiar with the standard questions, right? Hey, give me one of your faults, or give me a time that you have failed in business and you
Right.
rectified that
Right.
situation, right? Like those are so patented and so standard that everyone knows they're coming. And so, you know, they're designed to make me evaluate how you navigate tricky situations. But because they're so predictable, I'm really not getting a lot out of it. I think that I get the most out of a conversation when I'm being authentic and when I'm being genuine.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, your advice on asking that very simple question, hey, what do you do, Nicholas? What does it look like when you're really mad?
Right.
Like what does that look like? And your thought process around that, how long it takes you to answer that question, what you recollect, and where that conversation goes would be very revealing. There's no question about it. So
Well,
I think I'll add it to my arsenal, and I
right.
thank you for that tactic.
I'm certainly not suggesting being mean or adversarial, but
No, no.
I do think, and apropos of this too, I think this is an important thing to say. You know, when I went to graduate school 100 years ago, the the main interviewing situation was called the stress interview. It was designed to stress you out, right? Based on
Okay.
psychoanalytic principles. And you get, 10 people in the room who actually jumped through enough hoops to be in that room. And then there was an analyst who came in and said, hello, hello, hello. And he said, we're not gonna say anything. Um, and it'll be 3 hours. And then there was silence. Now, you can imagine, 10 people who've busted their ass to get in that room are now faced with, uh-oh, what the fuck did I do to myself?
Yeah.
Right? And it was just, you could count it. You could count it. The hairs on everybody's neck started, and then people started showing their colors. Somebody started making jokes. Somebody rolled their eyes. Somebody started fighting with the person next to them. Someone started seducing the person next to them. I mean, it was absolutely fascinating just to see what happened. He didn't say anything. He didn't say anything. He, in fact, said nothing. So I think there's something to that. I don't think you have to be as sadistic as that was.
Well, I think that's fascinating. I've not known that, but I can imagine that what would ensue, as you've pointed out, is a microcosm of life,
Yeah,
right? So you put enough people together, and all of these different backgrounds and experiences and habits are going to reflect themselves in the conversation. And you'll have people who are afraid of silence who are going to fill that void. And you'll have people who retreat and really don't say much and chip in. And yes, you're right. You're going to see all kinds of dynamics appear, right?
very quickly.
Yeah. And then we also have to think about the observer's role in that as well. So the analyst's role was really quite interesting. At the end of the day, does that observer affect the outcome of what happened there in terms of what they were expecting would happen, right? And even if they never said a word, there is an entanglement in any room. We're entangled at this very moment
Sure.
via the cables, the optic cables that we're using, or whether
Yeah.
we're using satellite or not, I don't know. But there's an entanglement. And so the observer is very much a part of that 10-person panel. It becomes an 11-person panel, even if they never say a word. And I find that interesting as well.
Of course, and absolutely right, and that's field theory. I mean, that's what field theory is. Field theory is, if you're in the space with anybody else, you have a system going on, right? It's a system based on what you see and what you don't see, but you're necessarily, what's the phrase? You have mutual but asymmetrical impact. You're necessarily affecting one another, but you don't know in what ways it's happening.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, sometimes I mean, this guy was. I mean, he wasn't friendly, but he wasn't a monster. I mean, there are some who come in there and look like their dog just died. I mean, he at least smiled a little bit and said, and then he just didn't do anything. And everyone had their own interpretations of what that meant. And looking at his body language and when he coughed or crossed his leg, of course. That's so interesting. I had something else that I wanted to ask you about. Switching sets. So, what I do and what most people in my field do uh, is we help people deconstruct their defensive system.
Mm,
We help people understand that a lot of their personality is constituted with the defense.
hmm.
And one of the ways we do that is just switch sets. So you are obviously very good at that. I'm good at it too. You can talk about 17 things at the same time and remember what you're talking about, and you enjoy that about yourself. And I do too. Not everybody does. And I think one of the questions I never thought about this until like 20 minutes ago, but one of the questions I think would be really interesting to ask, or not questions so much as see what happens when you switch sets. Maybe you do this
Sure.
automatically and see what the reaction is. And if you can be an extremely brilliant person and get freaked out by that, right? Because we're now talking about milk, and all of a sudden I'm talking about grass, and you're like, oh my God, what's happening, right? It's not an IQ test, but it does give you a good sense of sort of it gives you a good sense of personality and what will or won't ruffle some people, and some people get extremely ruffled by that.
Well, I love this conversation and I love where you're going with this because I can relate to it in the sense that we talked earlier about writer's block, right? And you asked me, is your business sort of predicated on an idea that people have writer's block and this is where you help them? And yes, occasionally people do get stuck. People who have enlisted with us and they're 3 months into the process and like, oh my God, what am I going to say now? And they have doubts. And so we stop. We're like, okay, like, do you need to take a week off? Like, do you need to just relax? Like, just clear your mind? Or let's create a word bubble. Where are you at right now in your story? Okay, let's have some fun. Let's like create a word bubble around this particular thought here. And I want you to go off in this direction and keep on going until that ends. And then I want you to take the next thought that comes to mind that's unrelated to it, but central to that main theme and go off in a different direction. And we're going to make spokes of wheels and we're going to go off in all kinds of interesting directions.
Yeah.
And so my contention is that in you introducing this different set, what invariably ends up happening is you and I are creating a word bubble, right? And so our conversation is this thought and it's gone bing, 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 bing. And now you're like, Alex, let's go off in this direction. No problem. It's central to the energy that we've created together. That's our nucleus right now, and that's not going to change.
Right.
But we can go off in any direction, and we can now find links between that tree and that tree and that tree. And that makes for the best and most original writing, in my opinion.
Of course.
So when we coach someone through the act of writing block, we get them to think laterally and associatively, right? And so this is associative thinking. And so now that concept is a brilliant new idea that gets you unstuck. And now you're off to the races again. They're like, oh, I can't wait to write. I got to get off this call, Alex.
Right.
Okay, go write, right? So let's do that. Let's go down another road. What road are we going down?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, one of the things I do on a regular basis is teach people, and I do teach sometimes, teach people the difference between a thought and an association.
Right.
And people are plagued by what they think are thoughts, and they're not thoughts. They're not thoughts. They're not deliberative. They're not thoughtful. They're not thoughts. They're associations. And once they know the difference, but I mean, not that you ever always know the difference, but once they ask the question, they calm down. You know, having an association of jumping out the window is not the same thing as I want to jump out the window, right?
Yeah.
For example.
Yeah.
That's great stuff. I could talk to you all day, but I think we might come to the end of our road. What else can we talk about in the last 5 or 10 minutes that I haven't mentioned or that you'd like to?
Oh my gosh, it's a good question. We could go in a million different directions. Well, I guess we could relate what you do to what I do. You know, you're a psychologist. You deal in the mind. You deal with people. You help people and the clarity that they have. And I find that my job's not too dissimilar in some respects.
Absolutely.
You know, really, what I've come to realize is that we all work in the mind and we all work in the heart. And sometimes to our detriment, we work a little too much in the mind and not enough in the heart, and maybe too much in the heart and not enough in the mind. And when we put those two things together, that's when all kinds of fabulous things start to happen. And the associations that we were just talking about start to become more original and more interesting. And they take us in new directions and they push our bounds. This is what interests me today is pushing my bounds. This new era, Act 3, that'll soon turn into Act 4, I'm sure, is all about exploring now and pushing further. losing my fear of criticism, losing that fear of judgment, and honoring my creativity and honoring the nucleus of who I am in this earthly presence at this time. Because, when we talk about that word cloud and that nucleus that doesn't change, I'm the nucleus. My soul's the nucleus.
Right.
And the associations are only as original as I allow myself to be connected to that nucleus. And when we lose sight of it, then we lose sight. The trees start to die, metaphorically.
Yeah.
So, maybe that's something that interests me that I'll think about a little bit longer after this conversation. But these are some of the things I want to touch on in this new book that I'm writing with Marcy.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that, because when people ask me what I do, I mean, one of the things I often say is I help people tell better stories.
Mm.
I mean, the concept of psychological narrative has been around forever. Freud, I mean, like most other things, he did it first, not necessarily better, but how you tell your story, how you not and very much like you with your writers, there aren't an endless amount of stories that are worth telling, but there's not one. There's not one story, and so what I do is, I try to help people make greater sense and have a greater sense of curiosity about where they've been.
That speaks to me. And I could take what you just said and I might say, okay, in other words, there's a universality to what we experience, right? So we can distill our fears down to a few fears. We can distill our motives down to a few motives. And there's a billion fears, right? I could be fearful of this light bulb. I could be fearful of that microphone. I could be fearful of my glass of water over here. But in essence, I could distill that down to one central fear. And so I have found that in this art of helping people write their stories, you can really distill things down to one of three things. And it's kind of health, wealth, relationship. These are the three big things that we deal with. And like you, Nicholas, it's interesting that you should say that you help people write their story, understand their story, analyze their story. That's what I'm doing in a different way. And because I have some expertise in the craft of writing, that's the vehicle I'm using to help people see their lives, see themselves.
Right.
And I've yet to meet a writer who's worked with us who hasn't undergone some type of transformation and left
Sure.
the book writing process and said, that was amazing. I don't even care if the book comes out. That was amazing. That's what keeps me going. That's why I want to keep doing what I'm doing.
That's wonderful. Alex, thank you so much. What fun.
100% right back at you, Nicholas. And thank you for your insights. Thank you for your help. I think you're an awesome person, and I wouldn't hesitate to recommend you in a second.
Okay. All right. This is Mental Health and Business signing off.